So architecture consumes so much resources. Like we're the profession that creates the most, like let's just say, trash in the world. So material, space, energy, etc. So in a world where supply is driven towards scarcity, so how can we create better places despite that? So how do we build with limitations?
It's a million, billion, trillion-dollar question. It's something as well I've always been asking. Um, I don't have the answers right now. There's some things that we need to attempt. There's some things that we need to try, and we shouldn't. At least one thing I know is if you can do something about it a little bit in your own way. You can't wait for the whole movement. If you do it personally, then you try to evolve from there and improve. I think that's one thing to at least address and respond because it actually just like whatever we've experienced for the past few months. There was a supply problem, there was a demand problem, and it actually, admittedly, we are guilty that architecture is in a live in a very capitalistic model as well. So it is very tough as practitioners. At least we have private practices. William, myself, and Aris. Okay, how to run the business? You still need to profit. You cannot say this is all charity. So, but where do you draw the line? So,
Yeah.
and if you remember, maybe last year there were a lot of declarations on climate. WOHA did it, Australia, the UK Reba did it. But I don't know if it's. I mean, they have done in terms of more mainstream ratings, maybe, but I think that's not the only solution. So I'm together with that journey. If I can learn from a lot of our profession, our colleagues, and we can really adapt something, let's do it. But it's also another very big question that's very societal. It's very very hard to really pinpoint as well. But yeah, probably less consumption. You really need to be a little more responsible. More quality works that needs to be done. Again, probably the generational thing is very crucial. Just like at least what you've seen with the old structures of the Spanish, let's say, in terms of conservation, that's already very generational, and that's already stood the test of time as well. But of course, in terms of program, it's not the best thing. There has to be things again to evolve. So that constant tension is there, and that's the beauty of it. I would believe that. I think that's why we have these kinds of talks as well and dialogues.
Yeah.
I have a very simplistic like dilemma or dichotomy with like sustainability, right? And the
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
is that the people who cry most about sustainability are the people who are complaining most about densification.
Uh,
And for me, the reality is that, that's really the
yeah.
best way for us to be sustainable is to have a smaller footprint. And so like I kind of like subscribe to ideas that about sustainability that are program and about lifestyle, but not to those that just says buy green materials. And I feel like,
Yeah.
the ones who are always like almost picket fencing about green building and sustainability are the ones who are living in very suburban conditions in the middle of a metropolis, the villages, them. And it's really almost self-defeating, right? I mean, you want to build a greenhouse that's 1,000 square meters to house 3 people that can house 1,000 people, and those those displaced people have to travel 2 hours every day back and forth from Cavite to Metro Manila. And so at the end of the day, I think, you know, we must avoid, this kind of like greenwashing and try to really focus on what can, do big change. And I don't know, right now, I think that's like you said, it's a $1 billion question. And if we had the solution to that, we'd be billionaires. But I think my focus is on densification.
Yeah. So from Sir Aris or Sir Poon?
No, what I think about sustainability or usage is um, much more, as I said a while ago, it's that uh, this is beyond us in a way. 50% of the problem. So we're also 50% of the solution in that sense. Although our contribution, our building's contribution is huge compared to the most, but it's still, this is about all of us. So all of us would have to act together. And if IPTC says that we need to act in the next 10 years, uh, we really have to act, not just as architects, but as a whole society. So it's more political in that sense. So yung mga nasa batasan, mas powerful sila kaysa sa atin. And and if and if there's just this law, and if a lawmaker enacts a certain law which restricts us to densify, forces us to densify, removes all of the restrictions on setback and all of that, and then building height, and then we force like Hong Kong, build Metro Manila like Hong Kong, and with just that one law, we could achieve that densification that Will was saying. Uh, so it's actually all of these problems. We are just part of that solution, and I guess yeah, it's hindi siya $1 billion question. It's just a piece of paper passed in batasan, and so in that sense, most of our efforts will just be a contributory in that to that one big movement into sustainability.
Yeah.
But then you run into the problems of authoritarian, of the authoritarian state, right?
Yeah.
So and then I think during the EQF, the ECQ, we had that problem, right? When they were saying, oh, they might, what you call that? They might claim the private hospitals, right? Or publicize them. But the reality is, it's for the greater good. But then all the private citizens complain, all the well-off people complain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, more on that scarcity of space. So are where do we settle? Urban sprawl or making our cities more compact? Like, is it better to design more and more compact cities with taller buildings? Or are we just gonna let our cities sprawl into the suburbs?
You know where I stand, you guys.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There
Yeah.
is a certain there's a certain tension and balance with densification, and I don't believe in sprawl. I as much as I'm a sprawl designer, I design a lot of houses. So, but there's a certain thing in terms of densification. Actually, if 70 to 80% of the population is really in urban cities, there has to be that certain mobility of walking and pedestrianization, and it has to go in terms of not always having being transported away. However, just like what Remful has had that study with rural, back to the rural, years back. I mean, you can. There's also a design that there is a glamour and purpose for rural living, and that is also another thing. Now, in terms of how people can live, you don't need to live always in an urban setting. There's that choice. Yet you have to have policy. Policy is very crucial uh, for the foresight for the next 30 years. Let's say, for the Philippines, because come 2050, they say that we're going to be a very rich economy. But I feel that we're going to mess this up if our policy and our infrastructure is like this. So are we running around in circles again? So that's my worry, in a way. So that's my stake. I still believe in densification, just
Yeah.
really very specific.
Same here.
So
No, no,
actually,
no. That that
awesome.
that exhibit, Buck, the countryside exhibit. It was not
Yeah,
about habitation of the countryside, but rather what other purpose it can be. Basically, it was saying like people were just giving up on the countryside and moving to the cities. But then
yeah,
we
yeah,
have to rethink what purpose the countryside will have.
yeah, Yeah, because it was already migrants that were taking care of
Yeah,
agriculture.
it's being empty. Yeah.
There was that phenomenon that's happening. So we're a very peculiar species, you know. So that's
Yeah. So I think I also saw like a video about REM that uh the the changing of lands in suburbs or like turning forests into like agricultural lands is actually relative to the growth of cities. So are we also gonna limit the growth of like because diba suburbs supply for the cities? How do we actually balance both? Because
Suburbs
some
do not
suburbs,
supply the cities. The rural countryside does.
I mean, yeah, the rural
Suburbia
countryside.
is still habitation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the rural countryside. Sorry for the words. Yeah. Like, are we also gonna limit the growth of rural areas?
You cannot limit. How you don't limit rural areas? What we're trying to limit is suburban areas,
I
right?
Mm,
would
That's why
disagree.
I was stating the differentiation between the countryside and suburbia.
Yes, yes, I
okay.
agree. I agree with that.
If suburbia is like sprawl, you have large tracts of Metro Manila land in very, very, let's say, Forbes Park, Salcedo Village, Dasmariñas Village. All of these villages are, in a way,
Sprawl.
not all within the center, within the metro itself. So, how Metro Manila will solve its traffic problem is simply to open up all of those streets all of those subdivisions. If just open it might be a temporary fix. That's the cheapest one. That's the cheapest solution, and that's the fastest solution. Overnight, you can solve your traffic problem by
But
simply opening up all of the
But
subdivisions.
Or you can
More,
but they
even just let
find new cars.
capitalism take over and say no restrictions. Because once you remove restrictions, they will start building, and once someone builds vertical, all the rest will be FOMO.
yeah.
mm,